Hi, this is Sandi Maki, and it's time for a little heavy breathing just after midnight. I guess I missed the before midnight window today. I've been busy updating websites and doing a little housekeeping in general, so I'm catching up with it here. Something has been on my mind since my mastermind meeting last week, so I guess we'll go ahead and talk about that tonight. We were in a meeting and talking about different things that people can be doing, books they can be reading, or opportunities that come in their direction. And one of the members in the group, we'll call him Steve, just for fun, was saying, but I don't have enough time to read books like that. And the secret thing here is that there's always enough time. It's just that in this case, I said to the hypothetical person, Steve, I don't think time is your issue. I think that you're using time the way that some people use money in a sales call situation. When you say you don't have enough time, you're basically saying it's not important enough to be on my list right now. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying that. Instead of using the time excuse, however, why don't you just come out and say, it's just not important enough for me to put it on my list? Because that's living a little more authentically. And then when you legitimately are pressed for time or don't have enough time, then you can use the time excuse. Something else came up in the meeting, and somebody else shared, we'll call him Tom, said, wow, and I got out of bed and drove a half an hour to come to this meeting, questioning whether or not anything substantial was happening or life-changing or life-altering. Now here's the thing that I know about this imaginary friend that I'll call Tom. Every single time he comes to a meeting, he leaves appreciating the fact that he was there. And I think one of Tom's knee-jerk reactions is to say something like that, just as a placeholder, to share, I'm not quite sure what's going on here yet. I'm here. I'm hoping that it becomes a little bit more impactful. But in the meantime, here we are. So I really don't think that it has anything to do with the meeting content itself. I think it's just one of those habits that he's gotten into in his conversation. Or I would think that if it was a real person. Because what goes on in a mastermind meeting stays in a mastermind meeting. Unless, in general, the group thinks it's fair for public consumption. I was at a meeting this morning. It was on goal setting. Goal setting is a good process for some people to go through. If you listen to my posts around the beginning of the year, you probably heard me talk about setting intentions or states of being. And this is really cool because in the mastermind meeting, a friend, we'll call her Carol, shared that she was doing a favor for a friend, we'll call her Sandy, and she was altering a dress, making the hemline a little bit shorter and doing a couple other things. Well, in the middle of this process, Carol got frustrated because the machine jammed and the thread broke, and I don't really know all of what was going through her head, but I know in that moment she would have rather been doing anything except altering this dress. Well, it turns out that she was listening to an episode of Heavy Breathing where I talked about the difference between doing versus being. And she decided, instead of being the person who was doing the work on the sewing machine, she was going to be the friend that had completed the alterations. And apparently the process flowed a little bit more easily and gracefully after that, for which I will be extremely grateful because the girl, we'll call her Sandy, wore that dress to the auto show last week. So it's great to have friends that, when things get a little bit rough, can look at the being of things rather than the doing of things that could be a little bit frustrating. So in the meeting, back to the meeting of this morning that I was in with a little bit of goal setting, I think goals are something that most people's minds can wrap themselves around. A tangible spot, kind of a place on the map, something that people can strive to work towards and look forward to. One of the things that I'd like to mention about goals is there's often a lot of pressure, or I've perceived pressure, when I've gone into a situation and I've said, okay, so make up some goals now. Go. your mind goes blank. My mind goes blank. And then maybe I'll put down some arbitrary goal just because everybody's expecting that I'll put down some goal, but maybe it's really not on my list. So I think that's a caution that people need to take. Have intentions of things that you'd like to have happen, and have some goals if you'd like, but don't feel pressure to write down a goal or come up with a goal just because somebody said, come up with a goal now, it's time. Because as soon as you come up with a goal, then we start doing all this self-talk stuff. And the self-talk stuff is all those things like, oh, I don't have enough time, I'm not prepared, I'm not set up for it. All of those self-talk things are really just saying, I don't care enough right now to make it happen, or I don't feel motivated enough internally right now to make it happen. Because if you did, those things would never come up. And like I say, if it was meant to happen, it would be done already. Which is why I don't necessarily have a list of goals. I have a list of intentions. I have the way that I would like to be. I have things that would like to happen. And I have an internal motivation for most of these things that keep me going, so I don't have to consult a goal sheet. Because if something is that important, I would have already had it finished. That's the way that it works for me. One little trick or piece of advice that I have for anyone who ever encounters kind of a day or a situation where you do have some goals, you have things you intend to do, and somehow it feels like all the spinning plates are kind of ready to fall over and you're not quite sure what to do, or you have a whole lot to do and you're just not sure how you'll have all the time to accomplish everything. When you become overwhelmed or stressed or a little bit crazy, you know what the most important thing that you can always do is? Take a nap. And you know why taking a nap is so important? Taking a nap is so important because you can clear your mind of everything that you're working on, and you can wake up refreshed. And if something really is that important, you can get back to it after you've taken a nap. Otherwise, maybe some of those things will get wiped off your list. And if you've been using, I don't have enough time as an excuse, when really you're saying, I just don't care enough to do that, then maybe you'll wake up and feel empowered to cross it off your list, or ignore it. Some things you can do like this, some things you can't. I'll leave that up to you in your life to figure out what that case may be. So even though it is slightly after midnight tonight, my most important thing to do in the morning is more of what I've been doing today. So if I keep up with it today, then I get to maybe sleep in a little bit more in the morning. But in the meantime, I figured I'd hit record and see what happened in this little space we call heavy breathing just before midnight, where the names are made up and the characters are not real. Or maybe they are, because what is reality besides a matter of perspective?